Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming back for another Sober Life podcast. I'm your host, Scott Jones. I hope everybody is doing great out there. We're kicking into the new podcast season here at Sober Life Studios. We're going to have a lot of shows coming at you. One thing I ask you to do is make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, or you save the show and share it with your friends. Also, make sure you leave comments. Even if you're watching a recording of the show, we go back and see these comments, and it's important for us to know what you're thinking. Perhaps there's a topic you'd like covered on Sober Life Podcast, or you want to be on the show. We would love to have you join us. This show is not about us touting our knowledge or our great expertise. This is about talking real simple talk about recovery and dealing with our addictions and or mental health issues, whatever you might be recovering from. And certainly we're hoping we're going to bring the joy of recovery to you. There's enough people out there telling you how hard things are going to be. I want to tell you how great things are going to be and how great things can be for you. And if you've got a story to share, please share it with us. I'm excited today because every once in a while you meet somebody, and I meet a lot of people because we do our trainings through One Brother, One Sister, one of our sponsors, by the way, onebrother1sister.com. Check them out if you want to help your first responders. But we do a lot of training, and we meet a lot of great people. But every once in a while, you'll get somebody that just kind of sticks with you. And this next guest has stuck with me since I think we trained maybe 2 years ago. I'm not positive on the timing. Everything blurs together when you're old. But this is Ali Ruge. And like I said, she made an impression on me. And it wasn't the kind of impression that, it's like, wow. It was more like, this is a person that is truly living in recovery and living the style and living the life and knows what she wants. And that always makes an impression on me. So why should I talk about her when we could just bring her on stage? So let's bring her in. This is Ali Ruge. Ali, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Scott, for having me.
You, like I said, you were one of those people that just kind of stuck with me just because of your infectious smile, your joy for life. Where is that coming from? That kind of infectious nature you have about joy and happiness. Where's that coming from?
Well, I think that's why I connected with you and Karen so well, is because we do have that passion. I think when, you've been on death's door now and you've been in the misery of active addiction, it's difficult, at least for me, to not be grateful for every single day that not only that we have alive, but that I'm not in jail, I'm not in prison, and I'm clean and sober.
Now, you're one of those people, and, every once in a while I'll tell somebody a little bit about my story, about my addiction, and they look at me and they say, "Oh, yeah, I can see that." But you're one of those people that, I don't see that person. So do you find it hard sometimes to convey to people how different you were?
First of all, I want to say I think that's the biggest compliment ever, because I do have people in my life who knew me through my addiction, and they'll tell you what a mess I was.
Yeah.
So all I tell people, usually because I am connected to a higher source, like me and you talked about before the show, my story tends to have depth and weight that other people can relate to. But if anyone ever questions me, I tell them I've got the scars to prove it. So.
Yeah. Some of them run quite deep, I'm sure, for all of us. But let's talk about, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about your story about, how did this all start for you with addiction? I mean, are we talking about addiction, alcoholism, or a combination of both?
All of the above. Again,
Okay.
something me and you have talked about too is like I really can become addicted to anything that makes me feel good. Now my drugs of choice were opiates and cocaine at the time, but it started with alcohol, it ended with alcohol, it manifests in food and sex, relationships, gambling, anything. So I love that, me and you talked about addiction as a whole and as a separate entity of us. And I can totally relate with that.
I love that. Just like I am a non-denominational addict.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
We do not discriminate.
We do not discriminate. That's right. And we'll talk more about that. But how did that all start for you? I mean, did you grow up in a family that had these kind of issues going on around the place, or what happened?
So oddly enough, no. And this is what I always tell people. And I always differentiated myself because alcoholism doesn't run in my family. I grew up a spoiled only child in upper middle class white suburbia. And I had everything handed to me on a silver platter. And I had two very loving parents. I don't have any childhood abuse that I'm aware of. But what I can tell you, I mean, I remember even being 4 years old thinking, I'm not good enough, or why don't I look like the other girls in school, or, that no one liked me or whatever. And, again, we talk about our disease manifesting in other ways. It can still show up like that sometimes because what my addiction, feeds at my insecurities and my self-esteem and my self-worth, because once it does that, then I tend to pick up a substance to cope with it. So kind of a typical cliche story. When I was 13 years old, I had my first hit of weed, my first drink of alcohol, which was Bacardi 151, and we smoked weed out of a pencil sharpener, all the same in the same night. So I should have known then, and that's what I say. I should have known then. As addicts, we tend to go hard or go home, and I went hard from the very beginning. And
Now,
it was.
what
Go ahead.
did that fulfill something? Did you feel like that's something that was missing? That was your courage, or that was your, what was that experience?
Yeah, man, that was it. I've heard a speaker one time. She said the first time she tried drugs and alcohol, it felt like she could breathe for the first time. And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I could breathe. I felt good enough. I felt a part of. I felt skinny enough. I felt pretty enough. Finally, like for the first time in my life, and that was really the hook for me, was to keep it going, was that feeling.
Right. And a lot of people out there listening, I mean, certainly pay attention, because it's hard to understand, addiction itself, but even to go deeper into, one of your core issues, which was insecurity. Insecurities are not based in fact. I just need people to understand that. You might look at somebody who is beautiful, and I'm sure when you were younger, you were as beautiful as you are today. But it's not based in fact. It's based in your own perception, where insecurities come from. So people say, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm bad, I'm not as good enough, I'm not part of, and you're like, well, you got everything. How could you feel that way? That's why it's kind of like tied up in mental illness, those kind of things, is because it's a creation of our own mind. When you look back, do you see where you might have been wrong about your insecurities back then?
Yeah, absolutely. I still see it today. Some things, this is all for me, what I've learned, especially about recovery, it's all a perception game, right? So it's like I can still have a skewed perception even in sobriety. So it's definitely like keeping that open mind and realizing, I mean, you said it, my feelings are not always based in fact. I suffer from a disease that centers in my mind, and it'll tell me all of these horrible, disgusting things about myself. And that doesn't necessarily make it true. And that's why it's, segueing into support. Like, it's so important for me personally. I attest to the 12 steps. I have a sponsor. I have a support group of 40 women who will tell me when I'm full of crap and tell me, I like this saying of like, I can't see my face with my own eyes. So I have other outside people do it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And, nobody can make you change perception, but they can make you question it enough that maybe you'll be able to shift into a new line of thinking.
Exactly.
Certainly. But let's go back again. All right. So, you really had a good life. Everything was good. You're insecure. And all of a sudden we find alcohol and drugs and say, this fills me. This takes care of my insecurities. This makes me more of a person than I was without it. So how long did it take you to progress into a real problem?
I'm grateful now. I had a bunch of old timers tell me like, "Oh, you're so lucky you came in when when you were young," and I was like, "Yeah, that's always what I dreamed of, to be sober." Like in my going to my first rehab at 19 years old. Yeah, I'm so lucky. But yeah, I did become physically dependent on a substance by the time I was 17 years old. So I did, again, I was able, I know a lot of people can relate to this too. I was able to live a double life for a really long time, where I was able to do really well in school, please mom and dad on the outside, but then internally I was dying. At night I was sneaking out of the house and doing God knows what. And I was actually able to get into college, and I got a scholarship into college, and that's really when just the wheels fell off. And I started just because if one's good, two's better. If
Yeah.
four's good, eight's better. And the progression just really took off quickly. And like I said, I could not eat, I could not brush my teeth, I could not shower unless I had a substance in my body by the time I was 17 years old.
Yeah, we see that a lot with people who maybe are on the fringe throughout high school. Like you said, trying to keep up appearances, trying to keep the parents happy, trying to keep everybody good. But in the meantime, secretly fulfilling ourselves with the addiction.
Right.
But then when you go to college, it's like you're stepping up to a next level of life. Now I'm becoming more adult. I went more of this, more of that. And as long as I'm adding more to this, I might as well add more of that other stuff too. And did you make it through college, or did it hamper you there?
Yeah, it totally hampered me. I did not. If anyone knows anything about college, I accumulated 27 credit hours in 3 years, which I'm pretty sure you're supposed to do that in like your first year. And by the third year, I was kindly asked to leave and lost my scholarship. And
Wow.
again, went to my first treatment center at 19 years old.
Wow. Wow. Now, obviously, you said first treatment center.
Yep.
Well, before we get into the treatment center, obviously now your parents are aware.
Yes, they were they were aware something was wrong. They didn't know exactly to what extent. They had suspected it was drugs and alcohol. And they were the ones, they said, if you don't go to this treatment center, we're turning off your cell phone. And that's why I always joke with people. That was the reason I went to my first treatment center, so my parents wouldn't turn off my cell phone. And then the second I got to treatment, they took my cell phone anyway. So I said, joke's on me.
The tough love model of intervention. Just let me,
That's
I love you, but we're not going to give you a phone if you're going to do that shit.
right.
Where did they get their help? Because especially when you're coming from a family that doesn't have a lot of experience with that kind of thing, to actually have the wherewithal to say, we're gonna cut you off from certain things, and here's what you need to do. That is actually quite amazing for families that aren't involved. Did they have help with all of this?
That's a really good question. I actually wasn't around. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure they either Googled it or they called our insurance company. So it was one of the two.
Okay.
But I know that they didn't know anything or anyone. And I think by then, it was 2009. I think we had Google by then. So they were probably Googling places. But I do know they called someone who was like in network with our insurance. So they might have gone that route as well. But yeah, they had absolutely no clue.
But it's brilliant, and thank God that they had the wherewithal to reach out and figure out what to do instead of just pretending it's not happening, which we see a lot of families do that too.
Right.
I'm sure it'll be okay. She just needs to, take a couple of weeks off and just, whatever. So I'm glad that happened. I got to ask you though, were you aware that everything was coming apart at that point? Because you said you tried to maintain school, you tried to maintain the family, you tried to maintain the outward appearance. Now all of that's crashing down. What was that like for you?
Well, so here's what's bizarre. And I always, argue unmanageability is also a perception, because to me, as long as there's a joke within my friend group, if I had half a McChicken a day and somewhere to lay my head, even if that was the concrete, it was manageable. You know what I mean? So
So
I
quite lower
actually,
than the standards you grew up with, though.
correct. Yeah. And I don't know, again, where that perception or where that just contentment with like misery came from. Like I said, I think that I was born with this type of spiritual malady where I didn't believe that I was deserving of good things. And wherever I learned that along the way, I'm not exactly sure yet. Maybe one day I'll find out. But, you know, I always thought it was a money issue. And I've heard people can relate to this too. If I just had enough money to get as much drugs and alcohol as I wanted, I would be fine. If my parents would just leave me alone, I would be fine. If college let me show up to class whenever I wanted, I would be fine. I was young enough where everyone else was the problem, not me.
Right,
And
right.
I didn't even think the drugs were the problem. I thought the lack of drugs was the problem. if that makes sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense to somebody who's become addicted. Is that if you take it away from me, I feel more unmanageable.
Right.
So if you give it to me so that I can at least satiate this urge and this craving, then I can think straight. And
then I'm okay.
And the truth is, we just get more and more dumb. We get more and more crazy.
Totally.
You made an interesting point, though, about you never felt like you deserved what you had, so that going backwards almost felt like moving towards what you're supposed to be, and what
right.
this like, well, I never deserved a nice family anyway, so sleeping in the street is fine. And that's an interesting way to put it. I hadn't actually heard anybody put it that way. You were actually moving towards what you thought you deserved.
Right. It was almost like more comforting being in the darkness, being without, not having anything. That was more comforting because it fulfilled, this self-fulfilling prophecy of me not being good enough. And then this is what people deserved who weren't good enough.
Wow.
Again, this is all crazy disease thinking. And that's what, again, I mean, you talked about how, like, I think they're all tied into each other now. Like, my addiction doesn't always have to do with substances. It has to do with those core belief systems, right? Because that's why a lot of us use in the first place.
Yeah, if all those other things are healthy, we wouldn't put ourselves in a position to become physically addicted.
Right.
But because those aren't healthy, that's why the addiction takes hold not only physically. If it was only physical, this would be a simple thing to fix.
Detox,
but it becomes emotional and spiritual and everything else.
Yep. That's what I say all the time. It was just physical detoxes would have 100% success rate. You go in, you come out, you'd be good to go.
Yeah. But that's not the world we're living in. The world we're living in is we've got 10 times as many people running towards the fire than trying to escape the fire, and you just sit there and you're watching people running to their deaths, and it's so hard. But let's talk. You went to your first rehab. I'm going to ask, I'm afraid, how many rehabs did it take?
The reason I like to share my story so much is because I was a 27-time treatment goer. And
are you serious? 27?
Yeah, that includes like detoxes, inpatient, outpatients, all that stuff. But from the ages of 20 to 24, I bounced in and out of halfway houses, in and out of treatment centers, in and out of psych wards, in and out of detoxes, because again, I thought that I could like beat the game. I thought that I could somehow learn. I always make a joke. I thought that I could learn how to smoke crack like a lady on the weekends or something. Like I never could figure out how to just like control and enjoy my use at the same time.
Right.
And that's what I was seeking. Or I thought that I could just use once. I thought that I could manage it. I thought I could exchange one substance for another. I thought I was just a drug addict, so I could drink fine. I thought marijuana was a plant, so I could smoke that. All just the crazy insanity that we tell ourselves.
Wow. It's, people shake their heads. I mean, I remember back, my first time in recovery 42 years ago, we didn't have these rehabs. We didn't have people bouncing in and out. It's like you either got sober or you didn't get sober. There wasn't this back and forth thing. And then as this developed, it's become shocking. It's like, how can you go to 17 or 18 or 20 or 25 or 27 places and not get it? And I think a lot of people think that it's just like, they just don't care or they don't want it. The thing is, we never knew what it was. And correct me if I'm wrong, is like, I didn't succeed at recovery the first time because I didn't understand all that recovery offered me. If I understood what recovery was as I see it now, if I understood it back then, I would have done it. But I didn't understand what I could be and what I could have, and I didn't believe in it. Is that similar for you, or?
Absolutely. I had no clue. And I always say, we know the first 90 days, the first 6 months are the hardest. We're talking about, extreme cravings, irritability, lack of sleep, all of those things, no money, it is really, really difficult in the beginning.
Wait. Are you describing the first 90 days of recovery or having a baby? Because I remember that same feeling when we had our first baby. The first child. No sleep, angry all the time. No money. No, go
Sounds
ahead.
very similar, but yes, I was talking about recovery, but I guess there are similarities, which is terrifying actually. But it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel sometimes,
Yeah.
So it's like when, at least for me, when I was in it, and I was for my first few years, I didn't realize that I could want to use and want to drink and not have to. And I know that sounds like probably common sense, but for me, like the second that I had a thought to use, I was gone. Like I thought that I had to act on it. There was
Yeah.
no way this feeling was ever going to pass unless I, acted on it. And so that was a big epiphany for me, was just because I thought it didn't mean I had to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's I describe it to people, it's like standing on top of a building, a high building. Everyone who's ever stood on top of a high building has looked and said, it would be so cool if I could fly. It would be so cool. Everybody's thought that. I
Right.
would love the Superman and just kind of fly, and it'd be so cool. But I don't actually step off the edge.
Right.
It's like, yeah, that'd be really cool. I'd like to, but you know what? I'm me. I can't fly. Wings don't work. Nothing works. I'm going to flap. I'm going to, and I look at my addiction as the same way as my alcoholism is, I'm always going to have a kind of a love of alcohol because that's what my body's in tune to, but it doesn't work in my life. And I can't, it's like jumping off a building to me. But
I
that's
love
hard to
that analogy.
that's hard to reconcile, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, it sounds like common sense. I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out, but
Yeah.
the way it was explained to me is like I did everything I ever wanted to do for 24 years. Like, so in the beginning of my recovery, I needed to do what I had to do, right? It wasn't about me and my selfish wants and needs anymore. It was about like surrendering to this process. And one of my favorite quotes, and I do this now, is like, do what you have to do in the beginning so you can do what you want to do later. And
Right.
that is my like to a T example of what my recovery has been like.
What was the catalyst for you for your final recovery? Um, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't know, it just happened. Well, no, usually it's like something anchors you, something reaches in and gets you for some reason that just made it a little bit different this time and made it successful. Do you know what that was for you?
Totally. I never ever want to forget it. So I can still tell you where I was, what I was doing, what I was feeling, what I was thinking on June 11th, 2014. And I was dying in a hospital bed of a blood infection. And my parents, who I was the apple of daddy's eye, only child, most important thing in my parents' life, wanted nothing to do with me. And the doctors had even told them like they weren't sure if I was going to make it. And they had said, we can't do this anymore. And so sitting alone with not one person that I loved or cared about that was my spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical bottom. And I had other physical bottoms, I would say worse than that in the past, like I've, been beaten, I've been robbed, I've been sleeping under a bridge, all those things. I've been worse off physically, but for some reason on that day, everything aligned spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And that's what I always tell people. Like, I don't care if nothing happened during your rock bottom. If what you felt, I've met people who felt internally exactly what I had felt internally that day, with $10,000 in their bank account, 2-car garage house, 3 beautiful kids, a loving family, and they had felt the exact same thing that I had felt on my deathbed. And so I love that you touched on that. It's absolutely spiritual, mental, and emotional. And from that moment, and I'm not going to say I did it perfectly, but I surrendered. I finally said, I can't live like this anymore. I still love the effect produced by drugs and alcohol. I'll still tell you that to this day, but I can't be happy and successful and use drugs and alcohol at the same time. So I finally realized that I had to pick one or the other, that I could not simultaneously use and be successful. And in that moment, thank God, I just surrendered and did what was told of me for at least the next 6 months to a year. And again, it wasn't perfect all the time, but I finally just gave up. I stopped fighting.
It's funny because we steal ourselves. I mean, we get ready. It's like, okay, I got to do this. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be, this. But then you end up finding joy very quickly along the way. You start to
Yeah.
build real relationships and friendships and trust, and you start going bowling with a group of people, or doing this or doing that, and realizing a walk on the beach sober is so different than passing out on the beach.
Right.
Those kind of things happen. Did that happen? Did that start to happen for you almost right away, where you started having those little moments? And
Oh
like,
yeah,
I call
absolutely.
them my oh my god moments, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, having a belly laugh for the first time in sobriety is I think that's one of my favorite highs to this day. Is just that genuine, like hardcore with your friends, cracking up to the point where you can't breathe. I mean, there's nothing better than that. And then, like, noticing the sunset for the first time, noticing a sunrise for the first time, noticing a butterfly land on a flower. I mean, it sounds so simple, but actually like noticing those things and taking joy in those things, where before I was living in Anadonia where everything was gray. I never noticed those things before.
Yeah, yeah. You took up surfing at one point. Was that all in recovery, right?
It was, yeah, it
Yeah.
was actually like 7 years sober, 31 years old. And here we go again. So with like the core belief systems, I had been a swimmer my whole life. I always loved surfers. I always loved the ocean. I always loved waves. But I told myself that I didn't look like a surfer, or I wasn't good enough to be a surfer, or whatever. And I let that hold me back for 31 years.
Wow.
And finally, part of my recovery, I went to a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, and I surfed for the first time, over 200 pounds, and I loved it. And I came home and I bought a board, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow. Now
Yeah.
just think about what you just said there. You were a little bit, you're over 200 pounds. You're grabbing a surfboard to go out. It's not like you can surf privately where people aren't going to watch you. When
Right.
when you surf, people are going to be sitting on the beach, and part of their reason for sitting there is to watch surfers screw up.
Right.
And you're
Absolutely.
going out, you're making a fool of yourself. You're being completely vulnerable
Yep.
with your appearance and with everything. How different is that from the child we talked about, who is so insecure about everything? How different was that to step into that? And was that a real achievement for you?
Oh, huge. I mean, a life-changing achievement to finally, stop caring. Because I mean, I used to be scared away from large rooms of people. Like I wouldn't even want to walk in because everyone's staring at you, and that's with hair and makeup and dressed up. Let alone on the beach in a bathing suit, on a surfboard, falling over, looking silly. And I don't know if that happened in one moment specifically, but yeah, it was groundbreaking to finally realize like that the people who are meant to be in my life and who I want to be in my life aren't going to judge me and aren't going to make fun of me, or they make fun of me to laugh and I laugh with them, but my friend my friends will still make fun of me, but not in a cruel,
There's
demeaning
yeah,
way. you
no
know
malice in there at all. Yeah,
Exactly. And so when I finally had that moment of like, you know what, I'm going to do what makes me happy in spite of what anyone else thinks about it, without harming myself or others, that like there is such true freedom in that, of
yeah,
finally letting go. And again, I use that word surrender constantly because I constantly wake up with untreated alcoholism and have to constantly surrender every day. So really living in that, knowing that what is meant for me will come, right? So that includes people too. If people aren't meant to be in my life, they won't. They can laugh at me and make fun of me at the beach, and what I realize is like I'm gonna survive anyway. And guess what? I'm gonna have a good time doing it too. So
that's awesome. So tell me, Allie's life today. You put in the time. You work a program, but you work with people. I think the program is secondary almost to the people that you're walking with while you're doing it. The people that are supporting you and building a tribe of support around you, and not just support, but loving and friendship and everything else. What is your life like today?
I could cry thinking about my life. I'm actually getting married in 26 days, which,
Huh.
if you would have asked me in early sobriety if I'd ever find someone who wants to marry me, I would say no way, or that even I would want to get married, you know? So having that, and then having, 7 bridesmaids who are my best friends. I told you I was an only child and I always wanted siblings my whole life. I cried to my fiance the other day that I really don't have a lot of blood family left. A lot of them have passed on, and I had a small family to begin with. And the fact that, like, I have 200 people coming to my wedding who I love and know dearly, and who I know love me dearly. Like you said it, it's the relationships, it's my tribe, it's the people that I know have my back no matter what, and vice versa. That love and that connection, we talk about the opposite of addiction is connection. I agree with that 100%, because that's all I was looking to do in my addiction. I was connecting with these substances, or I was numbing myself so much so that I could feel like I could connect with others. So to be able to do that in sobriety, I mean, like, we travel the world. I almost say it's like a trauma response, because I feel like I missed out on so much in active addiction that now I'm like, I want to go everywhere. I want to do everything. I want to see everything that there is to see. And like, none of that would be possible without recovery. So life
That
is cool today.
that's fantastic. And not to pry too much into your fiance's life. Do they have an understanding of your recovery? Is that
Yeah, so he's in recovery himself. And part of, our programs is we have 2 separate programs, we have 2 separate group of friends. And for me, that's how I think we keep it healthy, because I've seen people intertwine, and I think there is maybe, some benefit in that, but at the same time, recovery is personal. So I
yeah?
can't like tie my recovery in with somebody else's. I have to have my own recovery, and the same exact with him. So
Yeah, well, before, yeah, I understand, because it's nice to have, this is my group and this is your group, and then there's always some crossover, which is always that
right.
nice part. But you make sure that you keep some of this stuff as this is just my spots. I'm going to a women's group tonight. Now you ain't coming, all right?
Right.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
And you want to go hang out with the guys, but that's important. It should not be 2 half people coming together. It should be 2 whole people coming together.
That's right.
And thank God to recovery that you are a whole person, that you are self-actuated, self-achieving, and that you have all that. And now you get to share that with another human being, which is so awesome.
It's beautiful.
I'm so happy for you and so proud of you. You're just like I said, you're one of those people that you have a light, and you know I came to a point, and I don't know if this is a point you've been at yet, where I'm grateful for what I went through, because if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't know or see or feel what I feel now, which is a gratitude that's deeper than most, because we know the dark places, we get to appreciate the light more than other people. Have you reached that point?
Yeah, and I know I've heard some people say like, "Oh, I'm not grateful to be an addict. I don't wish I was an addict," but like I think somewhere around like 5 or 6 years sober, I really realized like my pain gave me a purpose. And that's why I love going around. I'm speaking at a detox next week, and if someone ever asks me to come share my story, if I'm available, I will never say no, because I believe like it was some woman similar to me who shared her story, who pulled me out of the darkness. And that's what I think is so important about recovery. And I think about, if I wasn't an addict, what purpose would I have? Like I would think it'd be something different. But the fact that we have the opportunity to pull people out of, the darkness that addiction is. I don't know about you, but I wasn't listening to a doctor. I wasn't listening to a therapist. I was
Yeah.
listening to you and Karen. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I was listening to your guys who had been through what I've been through and found a way out. Because again, your story helped hold depth and weight that other people's didn't. And so, yeah, I am so, and I know people think that's silly for me to say that. Like, I'm so grateful to be an addict, because I wouldn't have found a program to become a better person. I wouldn't, who knows of what I would have thought spiritually. But to be like on, almost forced onto the spiritual journey, I'm so grateful. And I know that if I screwed up today, I can wake up tomorrow and try to do better. And I think a lot of people, without spiritual programs don't really think about that kind of stuff. So I truly believe we are so blessed.
We really are. I agree with you. It opens us up to be more loving and to show more gratitude, and to be of service more than most people will ever think about.
Right.
And when you question your past, I mean, listen, I regret things that happened,
Of
just
course.
like we all do. But I have to have gratitude that I was given information that I could learn from, grow from, and share with others, so that maybe somebody else doesn't have to go quite as far as I did, or whatever the reason is. I have purpose. You're right. And the hard stuff is necessary. Every beautiful building that you ever see when you drive downtown, you see the glass and the steel and the shining in the light. All those buildings are built upon rock and dirt and mud and hard stuff. And without that hard foundation, you can't build a beautiful thing. So we are beautiful people born of hard stuff. So our foundation is more solid than maybe some other people, which gives me gratitude.
I love that. Oh, I love all your analogies today. They're so good.
So you're getting married and everything else. You're still doing your work. Oh, wait, before I get to the work, I want to ask you, were at least back in 2014, your parents were done with you. You're laying in a hospital pretty much all alone. It's funny because just from a few years ago, my wife died 4 years ago, and then the year after that, my daughter tried to, kill herself and went through a hard time. I've got a video of her in a hospital. She took a video of herself, and she was 6 days on meth and crack, hit by a car, threatening to kill herself, about to be Baker acted, and completely alone because I would not, and no one else would go to the hospital. We were done. And she videotaped herself, and she sent me this video, and I cry when I see it, because I could feel and sense that extreme loneliness. But I also knew my resolve not to be a part of her death. I wanted to be a part of her life, but I could not be a part of her death, which, as your parents did. What is your relationship like with your parents now?
Well, I'm so grateful that my parents showed up for my 1 year medallion anniversary celebration. It was the first time my dad had told me he was proud of me in a long time. My mom is one of my best friends today, which is wild because we did not get along growing up. So our relationship is actually even better now through my recovery. And again, I'm so sorry for all of your losses, Scott. And I wish I had a video phone back in 2014. I absolutely wish, I could have a video, but I am beyond grateful that I got to make amends to my family and, right my wrongs and ask them what I can do to fix everything. And their response is, we just want you to stay sober. They got to see me pick up my 1 year medallion. I got to spend my 25th birthday with my dad. And unfortunately, a couple months later, he passed very suddenly from a stroke while on vacation. And
I'm so sorry.
thank you. But again, now I see, right, for every pain, there's a purpose. So not only did I get sober through that, and I get to tell people, like, hey, you can get sober and stay sober through tragedies, but also, like, I am so blessed that my father got to see me get clean and sober. He got to see me get my life together. I was able to make amends to him. He was able to see me pick a medallion. Like, I am so grateful. And this hit me like 3 years into my grief. I had this epiphany that I was so blessed to be able to bury my dad, and my dad didn't have to bury me, because those are literally in life, those are our two options, right?
Yeah.
Like, either he was going to see me die or I was going to see him die. And as painful as it was to lose him, I would have taken that pain from him 10 times over, for him not to experience my death. So, again, perception, right? Losing my
Yeah.
dad was the worst thing, as I'm sure was losing your wife. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. But the kind of perk of having your worst fear in the world come true is now nothing scares you because the worst has already happened. So
I think that's beautiful. And just the idea that when your dad passed, you weren't part of the problem of his life. You weren't the trauma in his life. You weren't anything other than a beautiful daughter who is doing great things. And how incredible is that? When it could have gone such the wrong direction. Again, that's so awesome. Sorry for the loss, but grateful for the miracle. Grateful for the miracle.
absolutely.
So you work in recovery as well. You work helping people, and right now you're doing work with White Sands. What kind of work are you doing? Are you doing helping people get into treatment? What are you doing?
Yeah, so about like the last 9 years, I have kind of found a niche, and like my favorite thing is talking to people on day zero of their recovery, right? I didn't think that was something that I would like to do, but again, just kind of fell into it. And what I realized again is like I use my story on a daily basis to tell people like I understand you're hurting. I know you're in the darkness. I know you don't see a better way out, but I promise you that help is possible, right? And so giving people those resources. So I'm currently at a detox and residential facility, but for the last 2 years, I was working in the Medicaid sector. So to be able to help like that underserved population, that was like truly where my passion was. And that's where it will continue to lie. I, help people from all over the country and any type of financial resources. So that's something I'm very proud of, and definitely want to continue to be an advocate for people to reach out to me at any time.
Do you want to give out your number or your email or whatever you'd
Yeah,
like?
absolutely.
Go ahead.
So my contact number, I'm actually born and raised in Tampa, and I'm not getting rid of my Tampa number. It is 813-382-3311. And then my email, if anyone would like to email me, is Ruge, Ruge, which is my last name, soon to be changing, at whitesandstreatment.com. So again, feel free to reach out anytime. Scott, you have always been such a blessing to me and everyone else you meet. And so again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate you taking the time, and it's so good to see you. We see each other far too little, and I hope to see you again soon.
I'll get down there soon.
Well, take care of what you got to take care of. You're getting married. Show up for that. That's I could book us I could book us a lunch on that day, but that would probably not go over well. So we'll wait until after you're married, and then we'll get down here. Maybe have the two of you come together, or the two of you do a podcast with me together and talk about building a relationship in recovery, because I think that's something people rarely talk about. So if he would be interested, that would be a show I think that would be really nice for our podcast.
Absolutely. Yep. We're both on the same page as far as, always being of service in any way we can. So you let us know what you need and we'll be there.
All right. All right. Well, we could do it in 26 days. That's not going to mess with you. Not going to mess with you. That's, so that's so cool. Allie, right now, somebody out there is feeling what you felt and when you were laying in that hospital alone, desperate, but they don't know what to do, or they're afraid to take any kind of step, or they're afraid that there's nothing beyond the alcohol or the drugs. What do you want to tell them?
I think one phone call can save your life, and nowadays it doesn't even have to be a phone call. It can be a text message. It could be a Facebook message. It could be on Snapchat. I know the young kids are using Snapchat, so I'm trying to stay trendy. But
I just updated my MySpace page, so I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I would always say, closed mouths don't get fed. So if we don't speak up and tell people that we're hurting, then we're not going to get the help that we need. So that, even a simple message saying, I need help to the right person, that's all that it takes. So please reach out. We need you.
That's right. There's nobody out there that's going to hurt you more than you're already hurting yourself. Your enemy is not out there trying to get in. Your enemy is within you. And that's what you need to deal with. And let people help you. Let people help you, whether it's going into treatment, stepping into a meeting, calling your church, or calling a therapist. Do something in a positive direction, and hopefully we can reduce the numbers. I know people like Allie, myself, there's plenty of nights when it's hard to go to sleep because we've lost too many. And until that number gets down to zero, I'm going to continue to have sleepless nights and keep working to get the message out there, just like I know Allie always will. That's what we do. That's our job. That's what we kind of owe the universe, I think, right?
That's right.
God knows I didn't get saved because I was a beautiful human being with puppy dogs and rainbows. No, I got saved for a purpose that was beyond what I understood until now, and what that purpose is to help people, and it doesn't make me anything other than just a guy who wants to make a difference. And we could all do that. We could all do that. If you know somebody who is suffering or hurting mental health or alcohol, drugs, it's not the old days. We can't wait till next week. We can't wait until next month. We can't wait until after their birthday. We have to get help today. One night, the difference is one night. Living and dying is all in the next hit that you take of something, because you don't know what's in it. You don't know what's going on. Reach out for help. And if you're afraid asking for help or calling on somebody or calling somebody out, they're not going to like you. Good. I hope they hate you for a good long life. Okay. But it's a shame. I'd rather have somebody hate me forever than to love me for the next 5 minutes and die. So let's all do our part. Allie, love you, darling. You are the best.
Love
really
you guys.
appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
We hope to see you soon.
Yes.
And we'll have Allie back sometime soon, I'm sure, after she goes through and gets married, and, whether she likes it or not, we're going to have her on. So
thanks, Scott. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. Take care now. Bye. And for all of you out there, thanks for joining us. You've been watching the Sober Life Podcast. I'm Scott Jones. We'll catch you next time.